No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Talking on it though, then
He a
you're gonna
legend.
it up later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video we are going to create a global tier list and give you the top 20 teams, even though it's really 21, which it'll be pretty clear why I did that once we start going through the teams. I know I didn't provide much content last year. Maybe I'll get back into it this year. The reason I wanted to make this video is because obviously the season starts tomorrow, and I was going through some of my results from last year, and I looked specifically at the top 8 teams that I've ranked from last year. In 8th place, this video was recorded about a year ago, the one that I'm referencing, and 6 of the top 8 teams I had finished within the top 10 at Worlds, which isn't what I was trying to accomplish with that ranking, but it shows that my opinion of these teams is pretty accurate directionally in terms of like who makes it to Worlds, who gets there at the end of the day. 2 of the teams didn't qualify. That was Halma Life and Top Esports. They both didn't make it to Worlds last year, but they were still very good teams with very good players. So just running through that real quick, I had BLG as my 8th rated team. They finished 3rd at Worlds, which they were kind of a sleeper team that a lot of people liked last year, so I'm not trying to give myself too much credit for that. Gen G, I had them at 7. They ended up 6th at the World Championship. Then Halma Life was at 6. They didn't make it to Worlds. Top Esports didn't make it to Worlds. Weibo Gaming came in 2nd. I had them as 4th. Damwon, I had them as my 3rd team. They ended up in 9th, which was surprising. Just wasn't a good year for them, but it doesn't really impact my talent evaluation on the core players there for those teams. Then I had T1 as my 2nd best team in the world. They ended up winning. And I had JDG as my best team in the world. They ended up finishing in 4th. But a lot of good players, and it's interesting, there were a lot of players that moved around this year. So we're going to start in the LCS, and I'm going to follow the other sheet that I have. I'm only going to mention the teams that I don't have ranked, and I do have them in tier lists in my Discord, but they're not like granular tier lists or anything like that. It's kind of just roughly where do these teams belong. So I'm just going to go through them real quick. In the LCS, they only have 8 teams now, which is kind of bizarre. Mark Z is the commissioner. Personally, I don't think Mark Z did a great job as a caster or providing insight on the dive, but maybe there's some reason why they think he'll be a good commissioner. I hope it's good for the LCS. I like the LCS. Personally, I think the best thing would be to have a second league in the LCS and just forget about it from a monetary perspective. I think that from a competition perspective, they really should have, the best teams in one league with a second league that has teams that are not as good and put more games in it. But I'm not sure if that's realistic at this point with how the league ecosystem has kind of turned out. But first up, we have Shopify Rebellion. Shopify bought TSM slot. I'm kind of happy TSM is gone. We have Fake God, Boogie, Insanity, B-Boy, and Zazel. So most of this team was around last year, and these are names that we're familiar with. I don't have a high opinion of any of them. I don't expect them to do much this year. Immortals, we have Castle, who I've never heard of, Armeo, Mask, Tactical, and Ale. Again, another team with players that we would recognize, and maybe they can make some noise in a regional playoff, but they're not going to be competitive at the World Championship. They're just not talented enough. Then we have Dignitas, Rich coming back into a starting position again in one of the major regions. We have XU, Dove, Tomo, and Isles. Dove is going to be a lot of fun to watch. He's a very entertaining player to watch. But outside of that, I don't really have any expectations for this team. 100 Thieves, and now we start getting to an interesting organization. I think that in general, 100 Thieves has done some pretty good things over the past couple of years. They brought in Golden Glue as their coach. Golden Glue was with Disguised, which was Disguised Toast's team last year. Meech was from there as well, so they're coming to the pros together, which is nice. Isla had a little bit of hype surrounding their name a couple years ago. Didn't really turn into anything, but Isla is a serviceable support player. Meech, I don't know much about them. Quid, interesting, but again, another player that I'm not super familiar with. But as a former LCK mid laner, I think it should be an upgrade. River, pretty good player. And then Sniper. Sniper is the one that everybody's hyped about. This was, I forget what his name was, the former top laner. This is like his little brother or something like that. So that'll be interesting to see. Sniper could be a good top laner. I don't know. They had the other top laner that was supposed to be good. That didn't work out. And he went like full-time streamer. So again, another team. 100 Thieves, maybe something could happen. If Meech is much better than we think, if Quid has some real high talent level, we know that River can compete on an international level. Maybe Sniper can get them to Worlds as some kind of combo. Then we have NRG, and people will probably complain about this because they were at Worlds and they had a good run at the end of last year. Dokla, Contracts, Palafox, FBI, Huki, bringing back the same roster. I do think that they're a solid team, but if you told me that they missed out on Worlds this year, would I be shocked? Absolutely not. And those are all the teams in the LCS that I do not think belong in a top 20/21, which is really what I'm doing here. So let's move over to the LEC. In the LEC, we have a bunch of different teams and stuff. So we have SK, Irrelevant, Isma, Niski, Exakick, and DOS. So some names we know, some names we don't. I'm not sure about Isma. Niski has been overrated for a long time. Just not a team that I'm going to be rooting for. Not much interest in them. Giant X has some interesting players. Otoamne, Peach, Jackies, Patrick, and Ignar. Otoamne, Patrick, and Ignar are all pretty good players. I could see them maybe making a push for the top half of the table, but I'm not 100% sure how this region is really going to play out. We have BDS, who made it to Worlds. Adam, Shio, Nuke, Ice, and Labrav. I don't love this roster. I know that they ended up making a good run in their region. I just don't know if that's repeatable. I don't like the long-term talent there. Mad Lions, we have Merwin, Elyoya, Frescowi, Supa, and Alvaro. A lot of the players at this point, maybe it's because they played well in a different regional league in the LEC or in the EMEA region, but I don't know much about some of these players. So the fact that they have Elyoya is that's a good thing because it's a mostly Spanish team, and Elyoya is a proven commodity in the LEC. Rogue is a somewhat interesting team. Shigenda, Markun, Larson, Comp, and Zoelis. Obviously, the LEC, I think, is going to be more powerful than the LCS this year in terms of their depth within the region. But at the top, I don't really see much of a difference in terms of skill. Although, obviously, one team from the LEC is the best team in the West. So then we have Rogue, Vitality, Photon, Douglas, Vetio, Karzi, and Hillsong. Vetio, Karzi, and Hillsong are all interesting. Photon is interesting. I don't know anything about Douglas, so if he's another good Polish jungler, maybe they have something there. Not sure. We'll have to see how that one plays out. And then we have Team Heretics with Wonder, Yonkos, Perks, Flocket, and Kaiser. That's an interesting way of trying to slap together a team. Obviously, these guys all... Wonder, Yonkos, and Perks have all played together. I think Perks and Flocket have played together as well, and Yonkos and Flocket have played together. But I don't think Kaiser has played with Wonder, Yonkos, or Perks much. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But those are all the teams I don't expect to really make it to Worlds. I wouldn't be shocked if any of them missed it. Then let's go to the LCK. There are 4 teams here that we need to go over before we get into the top 20. So Nongshim, Den, Sylvie, Fiesta, Calmy, Jiwoo, and Peter. I'm not sure who's starting in the mid lane. Some of you will remember my Fiesta song from last year. I did the Lionel Richie cover. That was amazing. DRX, Rascal, Sponge, Setops, Teddy, and Playata. Don't think anything's really going to happen there. Kwangdong has Dudu, Cuz, Youngjae, Bulldog, Taeyun, and Andil. That I think Bulldog is a little interesting. Taeyun, I remember hearing good things about, but that's about it. I know that Dudu's made a lot of bad plays in his time as a top laner in the LCK. Then we have Fredit Brion. Fredit Brion's okay Brion. Morgan, Gideon, Karis, Envy, and Effort. So Morgan, Gideon, and Effort have all been bright spots at one point or another, but I don't think that it's going to be good enough to really compete for a world championship spot. I do like Morgan though a lot, and I do like Gideon. Effort not as much. And then in the LPL, we have Ultra Prime, and there are a lot of interesting moves that have happened in the LPL this year. So Decade, ZS, Hacker, Yukai, Doggo, and Joy. Doggo being on a team like this is pretty interesting. Maybe he gets a move to a bigger team at some other point. Invictus, we have Wen, Tianzhen, Cryan, On, and Wink. So again, some names that we recognize. They've had some experience in the LPL. FPX, Xiaolahu, Moyan, Milky Way, Care, Deoctom, and Life. Another team where, like, if you had some bigger names in the other spots, like, you'd be like, okay, that team's okay. Like, it's just crazy how many good players there are in China from a depth perspective. Like, they're not all world beaters, but it's interesting. Birdall, Meteor, Haichao, Kepler, Xiaoye, or Jinzhao. So Birdall is somebody who I think has a lot of upside. It's interesting that he went here. I would expect him to move to a larger team at some point if he has a good split. So Birdall's a name to look out for. OMG, they lost Cream, which is sad for them because now they have Cube, Xiaofeng, Angel, Abel, PP God. So some recognizable names. If they made a run, nobody would be that shocked because, you know, a team with PP God, they're going places, obviously. Then we have Rare Atom, Xiaoshu, Nayu, Vikla coming over from the LCS, was in the LCK, then went to the LCS, is leaving FlyQuest, Asum and Xiaoxi or Zora. So it's probably Xiaoxi, but we'll see who ends up starting. Then we have Thunder Talk. So we have Hoya, Beishuan, Yucal, 1XN, and then Chow Chow or Feather. Nothing really there. Then we have Harry, Croco, Relife, Shanks, Hope, and Kale. So Kale, Hope, Shanks, Croco, we've all heard of before. Harry, not sure if he name changed, don't know who this guy is. So let's get into the tier list. This I'm going to kind of do on the fly. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about some of these teams. I know basically where they end up numbered, but not where I think the tier breaks are. So we're going to start off with Team Liquid. For Team Liquid, we have Impact, who's transferred over, Umti, who's replacing Piosik, Appa, Yan, and Core JJ. I don't like Appa that much. I don't like Yan that much. Core JJ is obviously serviceable player. Impact, serviceable player. Umti, I know there have been some people that like him a lot. I don't love him. I think that Team Liquid is clearly the third best team from a pedigree perspective, but I don't know how much upside they really have. If they make it to Worlds, I don't expect them to be able to do anything unless Umti ends up being amazing in the LCS for some reason. Appa really brings it down for me. I'm not a huge fan of Appa. Then next we have Fnatic. And in my rankings, I have Fnatic and Team Liquid sharing a spot because I do think that they are the number 3s in their region. So for Fnatic, this year we have Oscarinin, Razor, Humanoid, Noah, and Jun. So the reason actually, wait a second. Okay, that's not who I thought it was. Where's that other support that I loved? I'm not sure where he is. So for Fnatic, obviously they've made it to Worlds pretty consistently. Humanoid's a highly rated player by a lot, but I don't personally like Humanoid. I think that he is very good at beating bad teams, but once you put him up against the best teams in the world, he just really can't do anything. Which, again, is not really a knock at him. It's kind of just, he's the best in a mediocre region overall because the competition just really isn't that strong. You look at a lot of the names he's playing against: Jackie's, Seiken, Frescowi, Niski, Nuclear Int. Like, these guys aren't, thought of as highly regarded players, and others are, arguably past their prime. So just not someone that I'm going to get excited about personally. Next up, we have Carmine Corp, and I think they belong in the same tier, so we're going to put them in the same tier. not meaningfully better, in my opinion. But I do think that Carmine Corp has higher upside because of Bo. I know that Bo didn't work out on Vitality, but this is the type of player who you want to continuously bet on and believe in their upside. Cabochard coming back. Cabochard's not going to be the reason why this team is successful if they are long term, but Upset and Targamas, that's a solid bot lane. Targamas plays a lot of different champions. Seiken, I'm not familiar with, so that could really be the thing that blows this up, in my opinion, and kind of takes the floor out. But I am willing to bet on them in the early part of the season when there is that uncertainty there. Next up, we have a team from the LCS. We have FlyQuest, and FlyQuest, I think, has a lot of upward mobility. I could see FlyQuest being a type of team who surprises a lot of people if they get to an international competition. Bwipo, obviously a very solid player, has great game knowledge. Inspired is probably the first or second best jungler in the LCS. It's either him or Blabber. That's just how it is. Personally, I think that it's probably Blabber, but Inspired's so good he can carry an entire team, which is why I think he makes sense with Bwipo and Jensen. A lot of other teams I'd be critical of having Jensen as the mid laner, but with a player like Inspired in the jungle, Jensen's role becomes clearly defined, and then you can actually utilize his experience, especially when you have an unknown AD carry in Masu. I have no idea. I don't know anything about this guy, but I do know about Busio. Busio, another young player from North America. I think that Busio should be around for a long time, so hopefully Busio can kind of tag along for the ride. I know that they're going to be asked to be a playmaker at different points, but this team is going to revolve around Inspired. Inspired is one of the best players in the region. I think that Inspired should be able to get this team to international competition on his own. He's just that good. I believe in Inspired personally. That's maybe a difference between myself and a lot of other people out there. So now let's go to our first team in the top 20. At 17, we have KT Rolster. And I don't think KT Rolster belongs much higher than this tier. But we have Perfect, who's a new young top laner. I don't know anything about him. Piosik, who's a jungler that I love. BDD, who's a known quantity. Deft, and Beryl. So this is the type of team that if they were in any other region, they would be... If they were in the LCS, they would be one of the top 3 teams, probably, just in terms of experience and pedigree. But they're in the LCK, which is kind of a tough situation because there are 6 teams that I'm going to have on this list. And we might as well talk about the next one, which is a new brand in the LCK, and that's FearX. So I think the reason I'm going to put FearX in the tier above them is because I believe in the upside of this team. I've been pretty consistent in terms of saying that I think Willer and Closer are one of the better, maybe more underrated mid-jungle duos in the world. And if this team is successful, it's going to be because of them. And if they're successful, they're not going to be a little successful. They'll be very successful. And they could really push for a top 4 position in the LCK, which will be difficult because the LCK... the other teams in the LCK that I have are all in the top 10. But I do think that FearX can be competitive with a lot of the LPL teams that I'm going to list off now because that's really what we're doing. So far in the list we've had 2 teams from the LCS, two teams from the LEC, 2 teams from the LCK, and now I have 6 teams from the LPL. So maybe we'll get a little more granular at this point. But we have EDG. So who do I like more, EDG or FearX? Let's take a look. EDG, we have Ale, who's a good player. Ale or solo kill. I would assume Ale wins that role. Jai, Fisher, Leave, and Vampire. I don't know anything about Vampire. Fisher has been in the pros before. I think Leave has as well. Jai, pretty good. I like FearX more than that. I'm going to put FearX above them. And maybe EDG belongs down here. Probably past this. I would say probably about there. Because the reason why it's tough to rank the LPL teams, even if you don't know a ton about their their players is the organizations are really good at identifying talent, and if you have a good jungler like Jai Jai and a carry top laner like Ale, you have to think that they're building a team that makes sense with one another. And the upside is probably there. And if they make a run, it's not going to be like, oh, they're a top 4 team in the LPL. They'll probably be bad at Worlds. Like they will, if they qualify from the LPL, they're going to be very good. That's really the question though. So I'll probably have to rearrange that in my top 20. World Elite, Wayward, Hang, Fofo, Prince, and Elwandi. So we have Wayward, Fofo, Prince, and Elwandi. I think that's a really solid roster. You put them in any other region, and they have shots at probably winning the region. Fofo is a player that I used to hate, but I actually think I unfairly had him lowly rated. I think he had a lot of good performances last year. So we'll put World Elite. Oh, no, I didn't do the LPL teams. I didn't download their thing. I guess it wouldn't be so bad. Let's just do that real quick then. Whoops. Team World Elite. Next up, we have RNG. So for RNG, we have Breathe, Wei, Tong Yuan, LWX, and Ming. So again, we have all known players. And actually, maybe I should just get rid of EDG. Let's remove EDG. EDG doesn't belong here. So let's go Fnatic, then Team Liquid. So again, I think Breathe is one of the best top laners in the world. He was just not on a team that performed well last year. Let's go to the next team. Next up, we have LNG. And LNG lost Tarzan, which is why they're down here. If they had Tarzan, they'd be more highly rated. We have Zika, Weiwei, Scout, Gala, Hong, and Mark. So all of those players can operate on most of the top teams in China. But they don't have Tarzan. And Tarzan really is, in my opinion, probably a top 5 jungler in the world. Definitely, over the past couple of years, has consistently been a top 5 jungler in the world. I would assume that they're stepping away from the spring and then coming back in the summer, which is also what the Shy is doing. So if those two come back, this team could look very different. So the Shy wasn't on LNG, but I could see those two going to the same team. They're both from Korea. Then we have Ninjas in Pajamas. Don't have their logo. I'm not too worried about it. Shanji, Aki, Rookie, Fotik, and Zhuo. So again, we have a lot of known players. Shanji is a good top laner. They were on OMG with Cream. Now they're with Rookie. So it's really a side grade because I think Rookie is one of the better mid laners in the world, and he wasn't at Worlds last year. But Shanji, Aki, I'm not a huge fan of Aki. Fotik and Zhuo, they're good but not great. But they're, again, if you put this team in any other region, they're going to be one of the top 2 or 3 teams, especially when you have Rookie. Rookie is, one of the best mid laners of all time. Next up, we have Weibo. Weibo came in second place at Worlds. They lose their top end jungle, replaced with ZDZ and Xiaohao. Then we have Xiaohu, Light, and Crisp. So you would have to think that this core can still get it done for the most part. This is another team. LNG or Weibo, one of those two teams, if they get the Shy and Tarzan, instantly becomes a top 5 or 6 team in the world, or top 7 team in the world. They would leapfrog some of the teams that we're about to talk about. But let's go back to, I have that right. That was Weibo. Then we're making kind of a tier break here because those teams just, I don't think they're strong enough to compete with teams like Damwon. So Dplus Kia, they don't have Canyon, and they also made a change at 80 carry. But And they also made a change in the top lane. So Kana is no longer in the LCK. Wow, I'm surprised he didn't get picked up by somebody. He'll probably make his way back onto a team. But we have Kingen, Lucid, Showmaker, Aiming, and Kellen. So there have been a bunch of times in this video where I've said, known quantities and players that are unknown. Generally, we don't really have a high opinion of, and it's going to hurt the team's rating. The only things that I've heard about Dplus Kia is that Lucid is immediately going to be one of the best junglers in the world. So on a team that struggled last year with its identity because Kana and Canyon, just there wasn't something working the right way in Dplus Kia. They still ended up making it to Worlds, and they ended up having a subpar performance for their standards because they are former world champions. But with the team that has Kingen, Lucid, Showmaker, Aiming, and Kellen, if you get a world champion performance out of Kingen, or a world champion performance out of Showmaker, or making a deep run with Aiming, or a player like Kellen, you have the makings of a team that has extremely high upside. If Showmaker is still one of the top mid laners in the world, it'll be pretty clear pretty fast. And if Lucid is as good as people are saying, then he's going to be in the Canyon type mold where he can actually carry games, which is pretty exciting. And I'm willing to make that bet. You want to be early on these types of players, because most people that are plugged in and would know about a player like Lucid, they're not typically wrong in the LCK or LPL for that matter. So now we're going back to the West with our first team in the top 10 from the LCS, and our last team from the LCS in the top 10. We have Cloud9, and I could easily flip Damwon and Cloud9. I'm not trying to take some huge stand here, but I think with Fudge, you have somebody who is definitely competitive internationally. Blabber is definitely competitive internationally. Berserker and Vulcan competitive internationally. Jojo Pyun and Vulcan didn't make it to Worlds last year, right? Vulcan was on Berserk. Oh yeah, okay. So they got rid of what's his face? Sven. So going from Sven to Vulcan is a pretty good upgrade, and Jojo Pyun is easily the best mid laner in the LCS. That's a huge upgrade. I think that this will be huge for Cloud9, and I think it actually makes them competitive with a lot of the best teams in the world. I can't put them up with T1, Gen.G, like these other very good teams, but I'm excited about Cloud9's roster. And some people will say, oh, well, super teams don't work. It's like, well, super teams work in every other region. So eventually one of these LCS or LEC teams, will be making a deeper run internationally. So I do believe in Cloud9. I'm excited to watch Cloud9. I was a big Evil Geniuses supporter. I honestly don't care that they left. When they lost Danny, they kind of lost me. Inspired Jojo, Vulcan, Danny, obviously it was a very good team, and it's kind of sad that it didn't work out. I was excited about that. That's always going to be it's similar to DRX. DRX had a bunch of good players. They all went around to different teams and ended up being very good individually, but collectively you had them all in one spot. It's a shame that it didn't work out. Next up, we have our highest ranked team from the West, and that is G2. So I think G2 going into this season is probably the 7th best team in the world, but I could see them maybe getting one more spot up. But I'm going to go with number 7 in the world right now. Broken Blade, Yike, Caps, Hansama, and Mickey. So last year, before the season started, I was uncertain about Yike, but my argument was always, if Yike is a carry jungler and the team can play around him, then they're going to be very good, and that's exactly what we saw. Caps is still one of the better mid laners in the world. Hansama and Mickey will probably end up being the downfall of this team, not because I think that they're bad players, but they're not as good as the other bot lanes that we're going to talk about coming up. Maybe they can beat them in lane once, but Hansama is not going to carry as hard as a lot of the other top ADCs in the world. More of a utility player at this point. And that theoretically could switch, if he starts playing hard carries again more often in these high pressure environments at Worlds, then maybe I would change my opinion. But I think he was kind of a limiting factor at their World Championship last year. So next up, we have another team from the LCK. We have Hanwha Life. And Hanwha Life, I was excited about them last year. I think I had them as number 5 or number 6 last year before the season started. I had them at 6 last year. They didn't make it to Worlds. But I still think that they have one of the most talented teams in the world. We have Doran, Peanut, Zika, Viper, and Delight. Zika, Viper, and Delight all had... Delight is coming from Gen G, Peanut's coming from Gen G, Doran's coming from Gen G. And I think you obviously have a team that ended up making it to the semifinals. The quarterfinals in Gen G. They ended up losing to, I think, T1. So that's kind of just unlucky. But again, Doran, serviceable top laner. He's not as good as some people say that he is, but he is definitely good enough to make it to a World Finals. Peanut has been one of the better junglers in the world for the past 5 or 6 years. Zika, world champion. Viper, good enough to win a world championship. Delight, impressed a lot of people last year. So I think that Hanwha Life is a team that we should assume is going to be able to kind of make Worlds next year and make a decent run at Worlds, to be clear. Then let's go back to the LPL. Actually, let's do some housekeeping. So we have C9, then we have G2. I think that G2, Cloud9, and Damwon all belong about there. Hanwha Life. I guess Hanwha Life. Hanwha Life is fine there. But next up we have Top Esports from the LPL. So 369, Tiam, Cream, Jackie Love, and Mako. So I'm actually going to put them a tier higher. I'm going to put them a tier higher too. I just think that these teams have more talent. Like Zika and Viper would be the best carry in either position in the LCK or in the LEC or LCS. They just happen to play in the LPL and LCK, so it's like, okay, well, there are other very, very good players there. Viper and Zika are arguably the best in their positions in the world. Definitely top 5 for both of them. For Top Esports, this is really more of a bet about Cream. I think that Cream is one of the most, not underrated because a lot of people don't even talk about him. I think that Cream is going to be insane on Top Esports. So we have 369, who is one of the better top laners in the world. Tian, I'm not super enthusiastic about Tian. He had to step away from the game a little bit over the past couple of years. Still a very good player, though. It's just the team isn't going to revolve around him. The team will revolve around Cream, Jackie Love. That's really going to be their bread and butter. And for that reason, they should be good. 369 can carry. Cream can do anything, but primarily is a carry player. Jackie Love can carry. Tian will not be asked to carry very often. Some of the games that they're going to play this year are going to be disgustingly bloody. That just crashed. I need my tier list. Unlucky.
All these people.
All right, the show must go on. So let's see. The tier list got wiped. All right, so we'll just get rid of that. Okay, so basically my computer freaked out right there. So I'm probably just gonna edit this video at the end. You've already made it this far, like I guess it's really not that big of a deal. So the final four teams, you probably just saw it on the screen right there. First up at number 4, from the LPL we have JDG. So JDG, we have Flandre, Kanavi, Yagao, Ruler, and Missing. 4 very good players. Flandre's okay. Maybe Shear's somebody who can pick up the torch and would be better than Flandre. Kanavi, one of the best junglers in the world. Yagao is a very good fit for this team because Kanavi is really the one who is going to make most of the stuff happen in the early and mid game. Kanavi, arguably the best jungler in the world. And then Ruler and Missing, obviously, just extremely good at their roles, and they're both very highly rated in their roles. Ruler is a top 380 carry in the world, and will be probably until he stops playing League of Legends. Number 3, from the LPL, the top ranked team in the LPL going into this season, in my opinion, is BLG. So from BLG, we have Bin, Shun, Knight, Elk, and On. Bin, from Suning, obviously has the ability to win a world championship. Shun is a player that I've been very high on for multiple years. Knight, one of the best mid laners in the world. Elk, one of the best 80 carries in the world, and is somebody who, again, not necessarily underrated, just not talked about enough. Elk, aka Jiaomeng from the Team World Elite days, very, very good ADC. Love Elk. And then we have On, who has been on top teams consistently for the past few seasons. On is good but not great. But I think that Bin, Shun, Knight, Elk, 4 very good players. Very excited by them putting together this type of roster. So let's see how far they can go. And then our final 2 teams, both from the LCK. I think the 2 best teams in the world going into the year are Gen.G and T1. So first up, let's talk about Gen.G, if it'll let me scroll. Computer's been freaking out recently. That's probably not good. I need to get that checked into. So we have Keen, Canyon, Chovy, Pays, and Lehens. So Gen.G is returning Chovy, Pays, and Lehens, replacing Doran with Keen. Keen, one of the reasons why KT was able to make a run last year, and then replacing Peanut with Canyon. Some people will blame Canyon for last year on Dplus Kia. Others will blame Showmaker or the rest of the team. Personally, I think Canyon's still one of the best junglers in the world, and this will really prove it. If Damwon plays better, then Canyon was a problem. If Gen.G plays better, then it probably wasn't Canyon's fault. Maybe we see a little different role in terms of how they fit within the team from Canyon this year, maybe playing less of a carry style. But I just cannot believe that he stopped playing League at a high level. And then T1, when you're T1 and you return your entire roster off of a world championship, you have to be ranked number 1. It's that simple.